Have you ever heard of a machine so powerful? It shattered all limits, outpaced every rival, and made the entire racing world bow in awe. And yet, the very company that built it turned its back and abandoned it? Sounds like a science fiction story or a rare historical blunder, doesn't it? But it's the truth. And the victim was one of the most impressive racing engines Ford ever created, the 1964 Ford Indy V8. Born to win the Indy 500, the most prestigious speed race in America at the time, the Ford Indy V8 stood as the pinnacle of early 60s engine engineering. It embodied ambition, technological power, and Ford's boldness during an era when the company sought to prove itself on every racing battlefield, from America to Europe. Yet just a few years later, Ford quietly ended this engine's career. Despite its glorious victories, despite its enormous potential for further development. No official announcement, no technical farewell, no one spoke of it again. Why? Was there a fatal flaw in the engine? Was it too powerful? Too uncontrollable? Or was it the victim of internal politics and behind-the-scenes scheming? In today's video, we'll revisit one of the forgotten, but most dramatic, chapters in American racing history. This isn't just the story of an engine. It's a story of ambition, of triumph, of sacrifice, and of being forgotten. Get ready, because you're about to enter the world of the Ford Indy V8, a machine killed off, while still at the height of its glory. Let's rewind time to the early 1960s. At that point, when people talked about racing in America, nothing was more famous or prestigious than the Indy 500, the annual speed race held in Indianapolis, Indiana. With a history spanning over half a century, it was the gathering ground for the top racing teams, engineers, and drivers in the U.S. But for that very reason, the Indy 500 was also extremely conservative. Most racing teams at the time remained loyal to the Offenhauser engine, a four-cylinder, turbocharged machine that had dominated the track since the 1930s. They believed in simplicity, in the power of tradition, and in the old saying, "If it's winning, don't fix it." And then, Ford showed up. When people thought of Ford in the early 60s, many still saw it as a mainstream carmaker, producing vehicles for the masses, affordable, durable, practical. But inside Ford, a wave was building. Young executives wanted to change the brand's image. They wanted to lead Ford into a new era, where performance and technology would define its identity. Henry Ford II, the grandson of the company's founder, had already begun to dive into major racing events. He didn't want Ford to be just another mass-market automaker. He wanted Ford to become a symbol of cutting-edge engineering, of speed, and of victory. His biggest ambition at the time was to defeat Ferrari at Le Mans. But before going to Europe, Ford wanted to conquer its home turf first, the Indy 500. And instead of easing into it, Ford decided to do something unprecedented, to develop an entirely new car, with an entirely new engine, and an entirely new way of thinking. They turned to Colin Chapman, the founder of Lotus, a British design genius known for his philosophy, simplify, then add lightness. Chapman was making waves in Formula One with his Lotus cars, light, compact, but incredibly fast and brilliantly engineered. And the handshake between Ford and Chapman sent shockwaves through the engineering world. Ford would take care of the engine. Lotus would be responsible for the chassis and aerodynamics. And this car would shatter every outdated notion of heavy, sluggish American race cars. To defeat all the Offenhauser-powered teams, Ford knew one thing. To win, they had to create an engine the world had never seen, powerful, lightweight, durable, and capable of surviving 500 miles of non-stop high-speed racing. And so, the Ford Indy V8 DOHC project officially began. Ford assembled a team of engineers, led by some of the company's brightest technical minds, and began developing an entirely new engine from scratch. No reuse of old technology, no borrowing from existing commercial engine designs. They created a completely separate machine, one that would later be known as the Ford DOHC Indy V8. Right from the design phase, Ford chose a distinctly European path. Instead of the traditional American pushrod setup, they went with a DOHC, double overhead camshaft. configuration. That meant 2 camshafts per cylinder bank, controlling 4 valves per cylinder, for a total of 32 valves across the engine. In the 1960s, that was technology most racing teams could only dream of. At the time, such architecture was found mostly in Italian supercars or Formula One machines. With DOHC, the Ford Indy V8 had a number of key advantages. A maximum engine speed of up to 9 RPM, incredibly high for American race cars of that era. Optimized intake and exhaust flow, thanks to more precise valve control. Combustion chamber and piston design fine-tuned for peak efficiency. As for the basic specs, displacement was 255 cubic inches, roughly 4.2 liters. It used a 90-degree V8 layout, a familiar configuration, but completely upgraded. The engine ran on methanol, a fuel widely used in American racing at the time due to its very high octane rating. Methanol allowed for higher compression ratios, greater power output, and helped the engine stay cooler during long races. And the power? Initially, the engine produced around 375 horsepower, already an impressive figure. But within just 1 year of development and refinement, that number climbed to 425, then 500 horsepower, all while the engine's dry weight remained between 150 and 160 kilograms, astonishingly light for a high-performance V8. And that's not all. The engine was also designed to be extremely compact. Thanks to this, Lotus was able to build a race car with a lower center of gravity and superior aerodynamics. This was a massive game changer. While Offenhauser-powered cars were bulky and front-heavy, the Lotus Ford, with its compact DOHC engine, sliced through the air like an arrow. But all of that would mean nothing unless this machine could prove itself on the racetrack. When the 1964 season kicked off, the racing world in Indianapolis couldn't help but notice a brand new name on the scene: Lotus Ford. An unfamiliar name, paired with a very unfamiliar car, small, low-slung, aerodynamically styled, and most notably, looking nothing like any of the machines lining up for the Indy 500 at the time. In a field full of big, wide-bodied American roadsters with thunderous Offenhauser engines, the Green Lotus, powered by Ford's DOHC V8, looked like an alien that had just landed on Earth. And behind the wheel of that Ford-powered machine was none other than Jim Clark, one of the greatest drivers of all time, the Scottish Formula One champion, a man who could seemingly hear the heartbeat of a car. Clark wasn't just fast. He was the kind of driver who could feel every shiver of the suspension, every growl of the engine, every subtle change in feedback from the track. And Ford, clearly, couldn't have chosen a better driver. Even in early test runs before the race, the Lotus 34 with the Ford engine stunned the experts. It was at least 10-15 kilometers faster on the straights compared to the Offenhauser-powered cars. It had far superior cornering grip, thanks to the lightweight and compact Lotus chassis. And most importantly, Jim Clark handled it with ease. But what Ford didn't expect was this: their engine was too powerful. So powerful that the rest of the car couldn't keep up. Remember, the Indy 500 isn't a sprint. It's a speed marathon, 200 laps around an oval circuit, covering nearly 800 kilometers. Average speeds stay extremely high throughout. Did the Ford DOHC V8 engine crack under such a harsh test? Not at all. The problem lay in the tires. The massive torque put extreme stress on the tires, causing them to overheat rapidly. Rubber began to shred, and tire structures exploded. And it wasn't just one car. Every car using the Ford engine suffered the same fate, or had to withdraw due to tire failures. Jim Clark, despite a brilliant start and a clear pace advantage, was forced to retire. But no one blamed Jim Clark. No one pointed fingers at Ford's engine. On the contrary, everyone saw the same thing. Ford had built something too powerful, but hadn't yet synchronized it with the rest of the car. Immediately after the 1964 defeat, Ford and Lotus dove into improvements. They refused to be knocked down. They faced the problem head-on, They collaborated with tire suppliers to develop more heat-resistant tire compounds. They tuned the drivetrain to soften the initial torque load on the rear wheels, and they refined the aerodynamics to distribute load more evenly across the car. And just 1 year later, Ford unveiled the Lotus 38, a race car designed from the ground up to fully harness the power of the Ford DOHC V8 engine. Compared to its predecessor, the Lotus 34, the Lotus 38, represented a massive leap forward in engineering. And they didn't forget the one factor that had brought them down the year before: the tires. This time, the tires were completely redesigned. Better heat resistance, greater durability, and tailored to handle continuous speeds over 250 km/h. The drivetrain was reinforced, especially the rear axle, now capable of absorbing the immense torque generated by the V8 power plant, something the previous chassis simply couldn't handle in the 1964 season. The frame was also re-engineered for optimal weight distribution, delivering exceptional balance and high-speed cornering stability. With such a superior machine in the Lotus 38, nothing could stop Jim Clark from returning to peak form. From the opening laps, the Lotus Ford showcased its complete dominance: speed, stability, fuel efficiency. Clark utterly outclassed the competition in commanding fashion. You can probably guess the result by now, can't you? Exactly right. Jim Clark took first place, finishing nearly 2 laps ahead of the runner-up. This wasn't just a resounding victory, it marked a historic milestone. For the first time ever, a mid-engine car won the Indy 500. And for the first time, a European constructor, Lotus, paired with an American engine, Ford, to conquer the most prestigious and conservative racing event in the United States. After that groundbreaking victory in 1965, the entire game at the Indy 500 changed. Racing teams quickly abandoned the Offenhauser engines, chasing the new wave of modern DOHC V8s. Car designs also shifted from front-engine to mid-engine layouts, ushering in a new era of balance and aerodynamic efficiency. And from that moment on, DOHC architecture with 4 valves per cylinder was no longer a luxury. It became the new standard in the world of professional racing. By all logic, the Ford Indy V8 should have continued to dominate, but instead, it quietly vanished. A decision that left both engineers and car enthusiasts puzzled. In my opinion, the reason wasn't technical. It came down to practicality. The Ford DOHC V8 was incredibly sophisticated, but also incredibly expensive to maintain in the long run. For a large-scale manufacturer like Ford, investing in a hand-built engine that ran on methanol and was difficult to scale up was clearly not a sustainable strategy. And you probably remember Henry Ford IT's bigger goal to defeat Ferrari at Le Mans. Starting in 1966, nearly all of Ford's attention shifted to the GT40 project, another speed monster, but one designed for endurance racing in Europe. Around that same time, Ford teamed up with a group of British engineers to develop a new engine, the Cosworth DFX, with advantages like being smaller, easier to produce, more powerful with turbocharging, and still proudly carrying the Ford-powered name. The choice became obvious. Ford didn't need 2 icons at once. They chose the one that delivered faster, cleaner victories. And just like that, the Ford Indy V8 was pushed aside, not because it failed, but because it no longer fit into the bigger game. Though it was abandoned too soon, the Ford Indy V8 still left a mark, a deep scar etched into the history of American racing engineering. It wasn't just the first engine to bring modern DOHC V8 design to the Indy 500, it was the catalyst for a revolution, from front-engine to mid-engine layouts, from push rods to dual overhead camshafts, from raw power to refined performance. After the 1965 victory, the entire playing field shifted. Indy was never the same, and Ford was the one who sparked it all. This machine paved the way for a completely new design mindset, laying the groundwork for an entire generation of engines, from the legendary Cosworth DFX to Ford's high-performance V8s on the street. It stands as living proof that engineering, when bold enough and timed just right, can reshape an entire industry. Sadly, the Ford Indy V8 was pushed aside, not because it failed, but because it was too complex for a more pragmatic game. Today, only a few of these engines survive in museums. But for those who once heard its roar at 9,000 RPM, who saw the Lotus 38 streak like an arrow in 1965, the Ford Indy V8 never truly disappeared. It still lives on like a forgotten genius, racing too far ahead of its time. So far, no one could keep up. If you found this story fascinating, don't forget to hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss more incredible engineering tales from the world of cars that history quietly left behind. See you next time.